Okay, so what do we mean when we say whole puppy development? What we're referring to is that our program looks at the long term adult dog that we're building and how can this dog be the best that they can be. And I realize that best is a loaded term. For our purposes, we're saying a dog that is mentally and emotionally as healthy as they are capable of being. So, how do we do that? Well, to do that, we first have to take a step back. I know dog, human evolution, mysterious, controversial. We're going to stick to a few facts that we know for sure about how we got from here to here. The Mesolithic people never would have believed it. So, how did it start? Dogs have large litters, short gestation periods, and sometimes very short lifespans. Here we to get to share our existence with them. Well, when it started, like 10 or 20,000 years ago or something, we figured out with these large litters, plastic genes, etc., that we could selectively breed for the qualities that we wanted. So training wasn't a thing so much as we selectively bred for the traits that we wanted and killed the ones who weren't working out. Why did we bother? Fanciers were not a thing. Non productive animals were not a thing. Why were we interested in selectively breeding for these qualities? Because dogs helped us get food. And you know what evolutionary biologists say survival's all about the four F's: fight, flight, feeding, and mating. Well, dogs helped us with at least one of those. They helped us get food. So we were interested in selectively breeding for the qualities that could help us get there. And getting food was a lot of hard work outside every day. Then it wasn't. Technology came along and getting food changed completely. And we really didn't depend on the dogs the way that we used to. But those social little buggers hung out. And now they expected us to feed them and they don't even help get the food. So we've got all these little social buggers hanging around, and we're like, I know, we'll make them our house pets and train them how to do it. The fact that this even kind of worked, it boggles my mind how adaptable and social this species is. I mean, look at that roly poly little pug completing a blissful domestic scene. It's incredible. But something fundamentally shifted here. And I am speaking specifically about companion dogs. With working dogs and performance dogs, they're still breeding to the qualities they want and then training natural tendencies. But with companion dogs, we had a fundamental shift from selectively breeding for the qualities that we needed to training for the qualities we wanted. That's a big deal. And so, obviously, part of this conversation is we need to be selectively breeding much more so than we do for pet qualities. But there is more to it than that. Okay, what we do need to start to think about is our companion dogs as doing their job of being our pets. What is their job? If it was a working border collie on a farm, we would know what their job was. We would know how to develop those qualities that had already naturally been bred into them. We're talking about a pet dog. What qualities do they need? Well, the Puppy Best Start program that I co founded with Wendy Harder of Dog Days for Dog Days, we picked these objectives as this is what a good, happy pet looks like: a dog who can respond appropriately to their world. If your dog, that means they're not reactive. If your dog is not reactive, for one thing, it will make all the rest of your training easier if you're not constantly managing and dealing with that. And reactive dogs are not feeling good when they're responding with excessive fear or aggression or whatever. If you have a non reactive dog, frankly, you're 80% of the way there. And this is typically what people perceive of as a well trained dog. When My puppy Neville was 6 months old. He's a service dog in training, and I had him at the dentist with my child. They were all like, he's so well trained. Not really. I hadn't even started to work with him. If I brought him to a trainer and they said, okay, so what can Neville do so far? I've said nothing. But what it is he can respond really well to his world because of his social development, which is what we're going to get into. We need pet dogs who are resilient because life. We need dogs that have impulse control. Trainers hear it every day. He pulls towards every dog he sees. He jumps on the counters. He jumps on my guests. Yeah, impulse control is critical to doing their job well. And again, that's aligned with their best interest and feeling their best. That out of control feeling doesn't really feel very good. Has handler focus. Um, as a pet owner, you'd probably describe this as a dog that listens or is obedient. Well, here's the deal, relationships are a two-way street. You do need and deserve a dog where you can get their attention and they can focus on you when needed, just like you deserve a partner that can do that, or a child or coworker, you name it. That is a fair and necessary expectation in any relationship, as is good two-way communication, meaning you understand what your dog is communicating and your dog can understand what you're communicating. So that is more than just obedience and a power dynamic and a dog that will do what you say. But to have that relationship, you need that handler focus. A dog who has the foundations for a good recall. Dogs with good recalls have better quality of life by far, and hence much fewer behavior problems because they're getting so many neurobiological needs met when they open up and run. They're getting tons of sensory enrichment. They're getting the blood pounding through their veins. They're getting everything that they need, and that will greatly decrease behavior problems. And honestly, I will die on this hill. We bred them to need that exhilaration of opening up and running as hard and fast as they can. We have a moral obligation to give it to them. The fact that it is not convenient in our current world does not mean we can just pretend like they don't need it. I'm sorry. You need a dog who has the foundations for good leash skills. As a puppy, actually developing a heel or a loose leash walking is pretty tough because developmentally their brains aren't there yet, for one thing, and their bodies are changing so quickly. They've got four legs, you've got two. It takes real neurological rewiring to find a stride that works with yours. And that is almost impossible when their body keeps changing and growing. But what you can do is start to build a lot of value in working close to you and understanding that when you're moving and walking, they should be watching what you're doing. And it's like a dance that they're following or an aerobics class. So we can build those foundations so that once the dog is done growing, they can really take off with their great leash skills. And also, a really strong recall is a huge ingredient in good leash skills. You honestly can't separate those two. And the last thing is comfortable with people and dogs. I appreciate that there may be other animals in your dog's world, but the bases that we are realistically able to cover in our program are people and dogs. And we know for a fact your dog is going to need comfort with those two species. So that is the whole dog right there that we're looking at, that we're going to try to help you develop the best that we can. How are we going to do it? You're probably dying to know at this point. Well, essentially how puppies develop is they're born, then they have a sensitive period until they're 6 months old. It's divided into two groups, the critical socialization period till 16 weeks, and then the secondary period that goes till 6 months, where the inputs that happened during the critical socialization period get reinforced. So starting with birth, your puppy's body is built, but their brain is not. They can't walk or see or hear. People think that means that they're like a little lump of clay that they can make into anything they want. That's not really true. Their genetics are there. I tell people it's more like a box of Legos. You do need to build it, just like a lump of clay. You need to make it into something for sure, but you're limited by what's in the box. You're not going to build the Millennium Falcon out of the helicopter set. So, how do we build this Lego set into a brain that is resilient and non reactive and can use good impulse control and all of those things in our whole dog that we've envisioned there? There are three basic ingredients: social inputs, that's any and all living things that are going to be in the dog's world. Non social inputs is what a scholarly article would call them. It's basically sensory inputs, things they're taking in through sight, sound, touch, etc. And the last ingredient is our, foundational, I can call it obedience if you want. I prefer to think of it as focus and communication for the best relationship that you can have. Again, doing like a 2 minute out of sight stay or attention healing, those are not developmentally appropriate for a puppy, and they're not what we're going to work on in this stage of their development. But we are going to build their brain to be able to make the most of that handler focus and communication. So over the life of your dog, you do have a dog who listens. And if you're working with us, we are going to work with you and listening to your dog just as much. So the non-social, the sensory inputs, essentially what that means is every novel sensory input that your puppy experiences, their brain grows a neural pathway. If you remember our Lego set, we're kind of literally putting the Legos together, teaching it how to respond to that stimulus. So a really sensory enriched environment with a lot of novel sensory inputs is going to be the base layer for the classroom. And you want to work on that out in the world a lot too. If you think about like a commercial breed puppy mill, if you will, rescue, how they're typically afraid of everything or they tend to be reactive, that's because those are very barren environments. It's the same every day. It's the same dogs. It's the same workers. Sometimes they have toys or whatever, probably, but it's not a sensory enriched world, and their little brains don't develop those pathways to be able to respond to the world. Now, if we're looking at thinking again about our working dog, our farm dog, their world is only the farm. And if they're running around on that farm, they're going to get the sensory inputs for that world. They'll be able to respond to it. Our pet dog's world is way bigger. So we have to really, really, really heavily give them tons of sensory enrichment so that they're able to be really, really flexible about responding to all of these different contexts: the brewery, the kids' softball game, your family's barbecue, all of these places, the vet, the groomer, even all of these places, we need them to have the flexibility to respond to that. And those are all different sensory experiences. So I could go on and on about, taking this in depth, but the big key is a lot of sensory enrichment. Then we break it down into sight, sounds, tactile, touch inputs, smells. That olfactory enrichment is really good for their development, and kinesthetic, things like balance boards and wobble boards. The next category, our next ingredient, I probably should have put the infographic there, but hopefully you can remember that circle. Social inputs, that's every living thing in the dog's world. If you're a horse person or something, you can bring your dog out to the barn. We don't have capacity to cover that, but we do work with people and dogs. If you think this picture, it looks kind of messy and chaotic and not professional, that's because it's not a professional picture. I snapped this at my family's 4th of July because we see 4 dogs here doing really well at their job of being companion animals at the 4th of July. They're relaxed around each other. That one is relaxed on the leash. She's brand new and we're still working with her. But as you can see, it's a nice loose leash, a nice handler focused dog. There's kids in life jackets kidding out. And the dogs are able to enjoy being a part of our world. And because they're relaxed and enjoying it, we're seeing the behaviors that we like. As far as humans, this is your main homework in Puppy Best Start. I know we trainers are really good at saying, you got to do your part too. You got to reinforce it at home. You know what? Don't let trainers shame you and judge you and point the finger. What you do want to do with your puppy at this point, the work you should be reinforcing at home is go have a beer with your dog. Go put on some costumes, have a costume party, have people over. Expose your dog to all sorts of humans of the world, all ages, from tiny babies to elderly people, unusual gait patterns like canes, crutches, wheelchairs, all body sizes, long and lanky people can really scare dogs that haven't had exposure to it because they need that social input while their brain can still build a pathway to respond to it. So your job is to get out there and have fun. Have tons of fun with your dog. They're going to get a lot of sensory enrichment that way too, but really just focus on all these different kinds of people and the places you'll find them. The rest will kind of fall into place. The social input that we do a ton with at Puppy Best Start is dogs. This does not mean every dog is going to have a super high sociability, wanting to interact and play with every dog. They're all individuals just like you and I, and their interest in play and socializing is going to vary just like yours and mine do. It can vary by our mood and how we're feeling and by personality type. But what we want is a really high degree of social comfort, meaning they can be around members of their own species and feel nice and safe and relaxed. And a lot of what we do at Puppy Best Start is called play based training. That's a term that I think we coined. I've never heard anyone else use it. And what we are focusing on is well matched, well balanced play. That means we're carefully selecting playmates and trying to do a variety of playmates and watching for and intervening in creating this well matched, well balanced play. Part of it is because it's fun. It will wear your dog out. They'll love to come to school. But play is actually nature's way of building a dog's brain to have resilience and emotional regulation and impulse control and cognitive flexibility. That means that they can think of a lot of different things in a lot of different situations. The more cognitive and emotional flexibility your dog has, the more they're going to be able to think of a strategy and think of a response in a given situation. And the less likely that strategy and response is going to be, as they can think of a lot of options and they can think through it. The reason puppies love to play so much is evolutionary. That's what's developing their brain for these life skills that they're going to need in any context. It is very tricky to do well with puppies. I won't lie. It's exhausting. But if you do know what you're doing and know how to watch for and create well matched, well balanced play, it is doing immense amounts to build a brain of a dog who has that resilience and emotional regulation and impulse control, etc. So we're not just training and suppressing behaviors. We're building a dog that just naturally feels great with the responses to the world that we want. Our last category, our handler focus and communication. As you know, I prefer that term to obedience because of the power dynamic and because we all deserve, with all members of our household, anyone that we're interacting with in our life, we deserve to have that good focus and communication with the other one, and our dogs are no exception. But how do we do that within a puppy program in ways that will meaningfully last through their whole life? One thing is position feeding. I am a huge fan of position feeding. That's just feeding them in the sit down or heel position. If you're doing a ton of position feeding with your puppy and you really never get any further with their training, you'll still have a pretty well trained dog. So I'm a huge fan of that. And the position feeding and heel is also a great foundation for their loose leash walking for a bunch of reasons. So we do a ton of position feeding. The other thing this does is builds impulse control because it's training the human to reinforce the behaviors that you like. We're super good at reinforcing the behaviors we don't like, and it's really easy to ignore a well-behaved dog. So it helps build the human habit of reinforcing with attention and food and the things the dog likes, the behaviors that we like. So I'm a super fan of position feeding. We program their markers, their correct markers and their release markers. There's a little bit of trainer speak. This deck was originally intended to train other trainers. But what that means is that we're teaching them that the word yes means they did it right. It's a form of communication to tell the animal when they did something that you wanted. We're that easy with humans, right? And a release marker. We use the word break. And when the dog doesn't understand if they're on their own free time or not, you're going to have a dog who always acts like they're on their own free time. And that's not a slight on your dog. When you and I don't understand and we're not clear on the options, we're going to pick the one we like to. And we program their cues, their name, their attention command. Again, if you can't get your dog's attention, you're not going to be able to get them to do anything else. And we do a lot of really hard work to program their brains so that they will turn to their name any and every time. It's a huge misconception to say the dog knows their name, they're just choosing not to. No, your dog does not have complex verbal processing. They do not. You need to condition their brain through your habits and not haplessly saying their name when you're not going to get their attention anyway, to get that attention, that name, that really good attention. And that's something that we work a lot on in our program and our recall. Again, I'm huge on a recall because it just is so important from a humane standpoint and reducing other behavior problems. We do a lot of foundational work to make recalling a really fun, great thing for your dog. So, oh yeah, I guess we have one more slide. We build value in their name, in training games, and the recall, and building value in a blanket. All of these things are foundations that is going to get you a really well behaved dog that you can communicate easily with, and that the dog is generally just choosing to do the things that you want. So this final slide just kind of ties it back to our 7 objectives and which of our ingredients goes with which objective. That might be a little more technical than you want, but that is how our program works and what our goals are. And we're really excited to work with you and your dog.